Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today I'll be doing my December and January wrap-up. I was so intent on doing year-end videos, like, best of the year, my book ranking, top 10 comics, top 10, novels, that I totally forgot to do a December wrap-up. So I'm going to do just everything all at once in this video. So in December and January, I read 11 books and 11 graphic novels, and also a DNF that I'll talk about a little bit. It raised my seat up a little bit. I was a little short there. I'm already short enough. Let's jump right in. Some of these I don't know that I'm going to have a lot to say about because I read them in December and I've already forgotten a good deal. One of those is, I'll start with a comic, Sandman Universe Nightmare Country by James Tynion IV and Lisandro Esterin. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember a ton about this comic. I know that it's about the Corinthian as a main character who is, I think, hunting another nightmare who is infringing on the waking world and killing people, and it's focused on this specific art student. But it was fine. Like, the art was okay, the story was okay. Didn't really make much of an impact on me. I did read another James Tynion comic. I read The Nice House on the Lake, volumes 1 and 2. This one with art by Alvaro Martinez Bueno. This was really good. This was a story of a bunch of people, was it 12 people, who are invited to a very nice house near a very nice lake by their common friend. And while they are at the house, the entire world ends. Like, there is a terrible disaster. Nothing is left. And it turns out their friend is some kind of weird alien guy who has decided to save them because he likes them. And he's made this house for them in this area that they can't leave, but whatever they want, they can order it and it'll come to them. But naturally, the news of him and his people causing the end of the world causes a lot of distress. People don't really trust him. People are trying to get out. People don't believe that what they see has happened about the end of the world. They don't believe that it's necessarily true. They think maybe he's lying to them. So a lot of drama around that. It is a really neat comic, really cool idea. And I think there's a sequel that's I haven't read yet. The Nice House by the Sea, I think it's called. So I want to check that out eventually. I don't know if it's collected yet, but I really liked Nice House on the Lake. Really good horror, and sort of, sci-fi-ish as well, because, aliens. But really solid horror story. Let's do a regular book. Let's do a couple regular books, regular novels. These are 2 books by the author Paul Auster. This is Ghosts and the Locked Room. These are books 2 and 3 in his New York trilogy. I read City of Glass, was the first book in the trilogy. I read that last year, and I liked it a lot. All 3 of these books have in common the fact that they are about a main character who is having some kind of identity crisis. And they are trying to find somebody else. And in trying to find them, the reality of their own existence and of their own identity is continually brought into question. So all 3 stories deal with these very similar themes. And they're all really solid. I enjoyed all of them. I think that these are the kinds of stories where they are much better after the fact, where you think about them a little bit more and you just spend some time trying to figure out, what did Paul Auster mean by all of this? They are mysteries that don't necessarily have a central mystery. The mystery is what is actually going on, what is real, what is not. And by virtue of the fact that these are fictional stories, none of it's real. So what of the fake story is real and what of the fake story is fake? So it's a lot of stuff like that, a lot of layers to unpack. But I enjoyed both Ghosts and The Locked Room. These books usually come in a single publication. There's a New York trilogy, just paperback, that has all 3 in them. I highly recommend just picking that up and reading all 3. I didn't explain any plots very well, but I'm telling you, The plots are secondary. It's all just about identity and unraveling stuff like that. So if you're into kind of meta fiction like that, go for it. Back to comics and graphic novels. Transformers Volume 1 Robots in Disguise by Daniel Warren Johnson. I really like the work of Daniel Warren Johnson. I like him so much that he actually made me read a Transformers comic. I do not give a damn about Transformers. I don't care about them at all. I did not grow up with them, even though I grew up in the 90s. Transformers, the TV show, was not on my radar. I did not have the toys. I do not care about Transformers. I only picked up this comic because I like Daniel Warren Johnson. I like his artwork. And this series did the impossible. It made me care about Transformers. Like, I actually would like to continue reading this story because not only is Daniel Warren Johnson first of all, you have to say all three of his names every time you say it, apparently. But not only is he a great artist, but he is a really great writer to go along with that. He is an exciting writer. He knows how to incorporate emotional arcs that feel genuine. Like, it's not all just shoehorned in there. They feel authentic and natural to what's going on. So he's got everything. He is a all-purpose creator. And I feel like that's kind of rare, especially nowadays for people who are working mainstream. Like, this is an Image comic, but for somebody who does DC comics like he does, and Marvel also, it's hard to find somebody who's just like, who could do it all and do it all really, really well. So if you're a Transformers fan, check it out. It's really great. And even if you're not a Transformers fan and you like good art, it's a good way to go. Another novel, Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I enjoyed this book a lot. I thought it's not my favorite of hers. That one is still Mexican Gothic, but I did like this one probably about the same as The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, maybe a little bit more. And I think it's definitely better than Silver Nitrate. Gods of Jade and Shadow, you have to forgive me. I forgot all the characters' names already, but it's about a young woman in Mexico who accidentally releases a god, the god of the underworld, whose bones were in her grandfather's bedroom, locked in a chest. She accidentally releases him and becomes attached to him through magic, and she has to basically go with him on this cross-country road trip to reclaim his full strength, because there's pieces of him that are missing that other like mythical figures have. And once he's able to regain like full control of get all his power back, he can fight against his brother, who is the one who put him in the chest in the first place. His brother who betrayed him. It is wonderful. It is a road trip fantasy romance. And it hits all of those genres really well. Every time I read a Silvia Moreno Garcia that's not overtly horror, I'm always surprised at how much I'm into like the romantic portions of it and the coming of age portions of it. She's a really good writer, and she's always creating something that's interesting and a little bit different. I will say that this book kind of reads like South American Gods. Like, if you know American Gods by Neil Gaiman, this is South American Gods. It's very similar in that it's constantly bringing in characters from South American mythology, and she's going on the road meeting all these things, just like in that book, but it's a lot less, I would say, intense. So if you're not too keen on reading American Gods, which based on what's been going on with Neil Gaiman in the news, that don't entirely blame you. I still love that book, and that doesn't change. But if you want to get something that's like that flavor, that's about mythology, but it's through a feminine lens, Silvia Moreno Garcia's Gods of Jade and Shadow is a really good alternative to that. So do with that what you will. Next up, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This one I obviously read in December. I think I read it on Christmas Eve. Just in one sitting, very short book. really liked it. It was my first time reading it. I've seen Muppet Christmas Carol several times, and I was very surprised to see how faithful that movie was to the original source material. Like a lot of it's line for line, which is awesome. I thought like it's hysterical to me that in that movie, Michael Caine he mentions that that's old Fozziwig's rubber chicken factory or something like that, and my mind was blown to see that in the original novel, the character's name is Fezziwig, and it's like it's not Fozziwig, but it's so close, and it's just as ridiculous sounding. But yeah, Christmas Carol, it's great. It's classic for a reason. So yeah, I don't need to tell you about that. And the last thing that I don't have a copy of, Throat Sprockets by Tim Lucas. This was a weird one. I kind of loved this book, even though I can't tell you exactly what happened in it, particularly like the ending. If I were quizzed on it, I would just kind of shrug. Like it is what it is. The idea is the main character, again, I forget everybody's name. He goes to like an X-rated movie theater and he sees this movie called Throat Sprockets that creates in him an obsession with biting women's necks. And he becomes obsessed with that movie, trying to track down like his own copy to see it again. And over the course of the book, the movie kind of gains popularity. Like there's an underground following around it, and other people start to also become obsessed with necks and biting and the drinking of blood. And it's getting twisted into this, kind of new type of sexual encounter that's replacing sex. It is a heady book. It is one that probably benefits from multiple readings. I only had a chance to read it once. It is a hard book to find. I had to find an ebook copy of it, and even then, it was like an ugly PDF file that was half faded. I think that there is a reprint coming out this year. It was supposed to come out last year, so I am nervous that it's not coming out at all. But when the time comes, see if you can get yourself a copy. If you like horror movie, if you like horror books about movies that are like cursed or create obsessive compulsive behavior, which there's plenty of out there. Flicker was another one from last year that I loved. Throat Sprockets is an interesting one for you to read. All right, let's get into the books that I have physical copies of. All right, I'll start with another comic book. This is The One by Rick Veitch. This is another weird one. I read a lot of weird fiction in December and January. So this is very hard to explain, so I'm going to rely on the Goodreads synopsis, which is also inside the actual comic itself. The One begins with the United States and the Soviet Union pushed into World War III by a certain blonde billionaire who has figured out how to turn a profit from a limited nuclear exchange. But the threat of Armageddon awakens a mysterious force in the human race that disarms the missiles and sets the world on a high-speed collision course with evolution. Finding themselves stripped of their atomic arsenals, both the American and Russian governments unleash top-secret super soldier projects to wage hand-to-hand combat against each other. The ensuing superior war makes nuclear weapons seem like mere child's play. So this is a comic that was very timely and also ahead of its time. It was published during the Cold War. It was in 1985 when the issues were first coming out. And it's also one that, just because of its exploration of like New Age mysticism and just continued nuclear fear, it's one that hasn't lost any kind of impact since then. It's not that it's more relevant now than ever, it's that it never stopped being relevant. So it is a scenario that's dealing with American capitalism in a critical way. It's also dealing with Soviet communism in a very critical way. It is a strange political comic. It's a strange superhero comic. I don't know what else to compare it to, other than like other Rick Veitch works. Like if you've read the Max Immortal, but you haven't read the one, I think you should definitely check out the one. I'm pretty sure the one he wrote that before Max Immortal, and I see where some of those ideas evolved to. All right, next up, another comic, Frankenstein. This is by Michael Walsh. This is technically it's Universal Monsters Frankenstein. This is a 4-issue series that came out from Image last year. It finally wrapped up in, I think, December. And I thought this was great. I was critical of the Universal Monsters Dracula series for not being different enough, because there's been so many Draculas out there, so many Dracula retellings, that it's kind of like, what else? Like, do something else. Like, what's going to be new about your version? This Frankenstein, I think, does something new enough, at least for me, where it's 4 issues long, and each issue focuses on a body part of the monster and where that part came from, and then it continues, like there's like a mini story arc just about that body part that is satisfied throughout the single issue. So, for instance, I know that was a funky explanation, but in issue 1, it's about the monster's hands. And we see, and I'll spoil this first issue just to give you an idea. We see that, who the hands came from. It was this man who was hanged, and the entire issue is mostly from the point of view of his son, who witnessed the hanging and who misses his father. And he sees Dr. Frankenstein come and dig up his father, and he follows him to the castle. He follows him to the lab, and he sees his father's hands being used in this experiment. And then he comes face to face with the monster, and they have an interaction. I'll leave it at that. So that is an interesting idea to me, just like the origin of the specific parts and the emotional through line of those parts and how they affect other people. That neat idea. That's a different enough approach to Frankenstein to make that series worth it and worth reading. All right, let's talk about some books. This was the last book I read in 2024, and it was a real downer to go out on. Lightning by Ed McBain. So this was one of the most disturbing books I've ever read. I'm not a huge fan of sexual assaults in the books that I read. In general, I'll take a stand and say I'm not a huge fan of it at all. But particularly in the books that I read, it's always like something that comes up and I'm like, oh, I really hope this scene is very short. It's just uncomfortable. And it's not that I think it's like it shouldn't be there. It's just that I personally don't like reading it. Just not my thing. So this book is a detective story that is completely about a serial rapist. So there's a lot of sexual assault in the book. The reasoning for the attacks is very disturbing. It's very messed up, and it put a really bad taste in my mouth. I'm actually not. I keep almost every 87th Precinct book, whether I like it or not. I'm actually going to be trading this one in. I don't think I'll ever want to read this one again. It was a little too much for me. Didn't care for that. That aside, it's a really good book. It is very well written. The balancing of multiple storylines is great, as Ed McBain usually is. It's just that that particular storyline, I don't need it again. I'm done with it. God, Emperor of Dune by Frank Herbert. I have a full review of this up on the channel. This is the 4th Dune book. It's also going to be the last Dune book that I read, most likely. Maybe years down the line, if I have a copy of Heretics or Chapter House Dune, whichever one is next, maybe I'll give it a shot. But I think this is a satisfying ending to Dune. I think I'm comfortable stopping here. I think this was a really good book. I was loving it at certain points, but I think it got a little boring in the middle, a bit of a lull, and the main character, Leto II, was a little too tedious and frustrating to have to read for such a long period of time. So that took it down a little bit for me, but still a really good book, really great ending to the Dune saga. Another comic. Let's talk about Foul Play and Other Stories by Jack Davis and Al Feldstein and Bill Gaines. This is another one of those Fantagraphics collections of EC comic horror stories that's done by, it's broken down specifically by the artist. So these are all Jack Davis stories from the waning days of EC. So this is the last of the horror stuff that Jack Davis worked on up to and past the Comics Code coming into effect. Uh, there's a lot of really great stuff in here. When EC was in its death throes and it was coming near the end, the Comics Code hadn't happened yet. They wrote some really messed up stories for the time that even they look back on like, yeah, we went a little too far with that one, including the title story, Foul Play. But they make for great reading. They're really fun. Unfortunately, once the Comics Code Authority hits, which is about like 3/4 of the way through this book, the stories are really lame. I think Jack Davis kind of checks out art-wise. He was always a fast artist, but I think he just lost the inspiration because the stories were kind of bland. So I kind of read those last stories just because they really were not hitting for me at all. What else we got here? Pearl, the novelization of the movie by Tim Wagner. I liked this one. If you liked the movie Pearl, you would like this novelization. That's all I can really say. I don't think it adds too much to the movie. You get a little bit extra insight into Pearl's, into her head, into why she does things a certain way. But other than that, just a solidly written book. Not as good as the X novelization, in my opinion. I highly recommend watching the Pearl movie, and then getting this if you're a really big fan of it. It's a nice, just kind of collector's piece to have. All right. New Spring by Robert Jordan. Wheel of Time, book 0, basically. This is the prequel series. The prequel book to the Wheel of Time main series. And I do not like this book. I kind of hate this book. I am torn between whether I dislike this one more than Crossroads of Twilight. That's the book that everyone always points to and says that's the worst Wheel of Time book. I really don't like this one. It's so unnecessary. It's so repetitive. And it's boring. Nothing happens in it. All you really get from this book is you get to see how Moraine started on her quest to find the Dragon Reborn, and you get to see how she meets Lan. And that's really it. And that's neat information to have, but a boring package. The way that it's presented just does not work. I would be completely satisfied reading the main series, which is long enough as it is, and just gleaning that information from what's spoken there, than having to sit and read this 300-page book about it. This 300-page book feels longer than some of the long entries of the series just because of how dull it is. So there's that. Sorry, Wheel of Time stands. I'm with you with the rest of the series, but I hate that book. I read another Richard Sala comic, Mad Night. This, just like every other Richard Sala book, is about secret organizations, cults, secret goings-on, murders, and normal people investigating them. In this case, it is his Private Eye character. What's her name? Judy Drude is the main character in this one, and her reluctant companion Casper Keen. I've said it before in previous videos. I just love Richard Sala's artwork. It is consistently just like enjoyable to look at for me. I love his aesthetic. Won't work for everybody, especially if you've read a lot of his stuff before. It's very, very, very repetitive. But to me, it's all about the art style. I love his art, and so that's it. I loved it for that reason, and that's all I have to say about that. Here's a cool one. Tyrant by Stephen Bissett. This is my own binding that I made of Tyrant. It was never collected. It was never finished. It ran for 4 issues in the 90s. It was meant to run for a lot longer than that. This is a really cool thing for me, though, because I was struggling to find issue 2 of this for a really long time. And I ended up reaching out to Stephen Bissett directly and just asking him if he had a copy. And he was like, yeah, I'd be happy to send that to you. So we worked something out. He sent it to me, and he sent me along with this very nice, note that I included in my binding I made for it, where he says, "Thanks for caring about my pet project of the 1990s. If only the direct market hadn't imploded. Enjoy and best, Stephen Bissett." So I created a little title page there. You can see explain the contents. Tyrant is his dinosaur masterpiece. Stephen Bissett loves dinosaurs. He likes them more than superheroes. That's for sure. And this was meant to be the epic life story of a dinosaur that he was going to call Tyrant, from from being in the egg to its last days, to its dying days. All we got was Tyrant just getting out of the egg. That's all we got in those first 4 issues. But God, it's amazing. The art is incredible. The detail and like realistic history of like just like the landscape of the dinosaur times. Like Stephen Bissett was really into it. This wasn't just like an aesthetic project. He was deeply into the actual like archaeological aspect of it, and the real history of what it was like on Earth at that time. So it's really cool. If you could ever find issues of Tyrant in back issue bins, grab them. Grab all 4. They're really fun. What else we got? Robert McCammon, The Wolf's Hour. I also have a full review of this one up on the channel. This is about a man who is a werewolf who airdrops into Nazi Germany or Nazi occupied France during World War II to try to I think it's like get information out from a spy or something like that. He's a one-man army. He's a one-man wrecking crew. Goes in and fights Nazis. Werewolf fight Nazis. What else do you have to know? Watch my full review of this one for my complete thoughts. But I enjoyed this book. It's actually 2 books in one, basically, because it bounces back and forth between the past and the present. And the past is a really good novel. Present is a really good novel. When they combine, it's an okay novel because it's a little too long together, but both individual books are really good. Let's see if we could stack this to be better. There. Nope, still tilting. Okay, we'll try to fix that. We'll try to fix that with this book here. The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval. I did not care for this book at all. I was really surprised because a few booktubers that I like recommended it. This is a kind of retelling of the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Horror at Red Hook, The Something of Red Hook. I don't know. It's one of his most racist stories, apparently. If I've ever read it, it's been a long time. Victor Laval is a black man, and this is a story about a black man, Black Tom, who is a street musician who becomes deeply embroiled in this Lovecraftian plot by this white guy to release an elder god into the world, blah, 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 blah. Typical H.P. Lovecraft plot. I wasn't a huge fan of just the structure of this book. I also don't think that it particularly added anything to the mythos that was like new. It just kind of read like any other Lovecraft ripoff, really. It was fine, but it was honestly kind of boring. I didn't get anything new out of this. So, big disappointment there. All right, we almost done? Oh my god, I've been talking forever, I feel like. All right, let's bookend my comics with another Daniel Warren Johnson. This is Dead Earth, Wonder Woman Dead Earth by him. This was on my top 10 comics and graphic novels of 2024 list. This one did so primarily on the strength of the artwork. I think I explain it in my full video about my top comics. Electric artwork, absolutely sensational. I love the oversized format. It's very conducive to these epic battles between Wonder Woman and these enormous, mythological creatures. There's also a fight in here between her and Superman that lasts, I think, like 8 or 9 pages, and it is freaking awesome. It is just I'm looking at it right now. It's so cool. Oh, God. Just his big sound effects, his big onomatopoeia, just the extreme body language. Oh, it's just so rad. It's so rad. it's great. It's great. The story's fine. It's Wonder Woman. The apocalypse has happened. Nuclear war. Yada yada. Um, I'm really phoning this whole video in, aren't I? And she wakes up and she's gonna have to lead a band of survivors to somewhere safe. But it's just really great artwork. It's a lot of really cool fights, and I just loved it. All right, the last book that I finished, and then I'll tell you the DNF that I had, and also what I'm currently reading, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This was really great. This is about a young woman. She marries Mr. Maxim de Winter. She becomes the second Mrs. de Winter. Her name is never revealed throughout the book, which is great, because the whole premise of the book is that she goes to his amazing estate that's like a tourist attraction, and everybody that she meets just like compares her to his previous wife Rebecca, and I love that I love that touch where Rebecca is so important to everybody that she meets and is so important to their lives that the main character never even gets her own name, because it's all just about Rebecca. Rebecca died under sort of mysterious circumstances, which leads to a very great, really suspenseful mystery, which pays off really, really well. This is just a very enjoyable book. I actually still need to rewatch the Hitchcock movie. It's been years since I've seen it, but I thought this was terrific. And if you're looking for a classic to read, I highly recommend Rebecca. The book that I did not finish was surprisingly a Robert McCammon book, The Night Boat. This is another one that's dealing with Nazis. This time, a submarine left over from World War II is knocked loose from like the ocean floor, and it beaches at on the shores of a Caribbean island, and the townspeople there are superstitious about it because of like there's a reputation behind this night boat, and it's like a ghost story. You know, the boat is still active. This is Robert McCammon's third published book, but the second one that he wrote, according to Wikipedia. And this just feels amateurish. This actually feels more amateurish than his actually first written book, Baal, which I didn't really care for that book, but it was okay. This was like nothing. Like there was so little intrigue here. The characters like on this Caribbean island, I think he was going for, that Stephen King kind of small town. Everyone gets a personality. Everyone gets their own scene, and it falls completely flat. And I found myself really bored by it. Not interested in the ghost U-boat in any capacity. It just did not work for me, which is a real bummer, because I've enjoyed pretty much everything else I've read from him. At least a little bit. So skip The Night Boat. And now the book I'm currently reading, which is going to take me a while. I'm actually not even done with the month yet, but I already know I'm not going to finish it. This is going to go into February. Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. Book 5 of the Stormlight Archive. You either know what that is or you don't. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. I'm about 100 pages in, and I'm really enjoying it so far. We'll see how it goes, because I've got 1,200 pages left. So yeah, that's it. That's December and January. Let me know if you read anything that I talked about today, and your thoughts about it in the comments below. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.